"Sir, my father had the same birthmark," the black waitress said with a trembling voice. The billionaire froze. How dare a black waitress speak to him? His world tilting as he glanced at the scar she pointed to. A memory he'd buried decades ago stirred from its grave. The damage has been done, and there is no going back. Who is she really? And why did she look so hauntingly familiar? One question cracked open a truth neither of them was ready for. What began as an accidental encounter would unravel secrets long kept in silence and rewrite everything. Stay tuned and watch the story unfolds. Jasmine Carter balanced the tray on one hand like she'd done 1,000 times before, though tonight her grip felt tighter than usual. The exclusive downtown fundraiser was a different world. Velvet gowns, tuxedos, the gentle clink of crystal glasses. She wore her plain black server's uniform, her hair tucked neatly under a bun cap, her sneakers worn thin from long shifts at the restaurant. She'd only picked up this catering gig last minute, hoping the pay would stretch far enough to cover groceries and next month's rent. She moved gracefully between tables, refilling drinks and clearing plates, trying to stay invisible in a room full of power and wealth. At table 9, a group of sharply dressed business people laughed over some insider joke. A woman in diamonds waved her glass, and Jasmine stepped forward to pour. That's when she saw it. The man at the head of the table, gray at the temples, sharp in his charcoal suit, quiet and calm like someone who never had to raise his voice, reached out to cut a bite of filet mignon. His sleeve slid up slightly. On the inside of his left wrist was a mark, pale and crescent-shaped, like a half-moon pressed into the skin by time itself. Her breath caught. She almost dropped the pitcher. Her mother's voice rushed into her memory, as clear as if she were standing beside her. "If you ever see a man with a scar like this, right here on the wrist, you remember it, Jasmine. That's how you'll know." Jasmine blinked, her heart pounding. Her hand trembled around the neck of the glass pitcher. The water sloshed near the brim. She shouldn't say anything. She knew that. This was a formal event. She was hired to serve, not speak, especially not to men like him. But the words escaped before she could catch them. "Hi, sir," she said quietly. "My father had the same birthmark." It came out soft, almost like a confession. The table's chatter didn't notice, but Leonard Cross heard every syllable. His fork froze halfway to his mouth. He turned to her slowly, and in that second, the noise of the room seemed to blur into nothing. The string quartet, the laughter, the clinking glasses all muted under the weight of a single look. He stared at her. His dark eyes, once distracted and indifferent, now focused sharply on her face. For a brief, jarring moment, the billionaire real estate mogul didn't look like someone who controlled half the skyline. He looked like a man seeing a ghost. Jasmine stepped back instinctively. "I'm sorry," she stammered. I shouldn't have said that. Excuse me." He didn't respond. He couldn't. She turned quickly, fleeing toward the back hallway, where the kitchen door swung shut behind her. Her chest heaved. She leaned against the cold metal wall, the pitcher still clutched in both hands. What had she just done? She replayed the moment in her mind. The scar, his eyes, her own words. The air in her lungs burned. Her mother had been gone for almost 8 years now, but the memory of that mark, that warning, had never faded. In the dining room, Leonard Cross sat still, the sound of $1,000 string quartet fading into static in his ears. His left hand slowly lowered the fork onto his plate. His right reached toward his wrist, touching the mark gently, absently, like he had only just noticed it for the first time in decades. The conversation at the table picked up again, oblivious to the shift in his expression. But Leonard didn't rejoin it. He kept his eyes on the hallway she had vanished into, trying to steady the sudden wave rising in his chest. His fingers hovered over the crescent-shaped scar. It had always been there, meaningless. A birthmark his mother once joked looked like a bitten moon. But now, that crescent was a key to a past he'd spent years trying to forget. He didn't know the girl's name. Didn't know why her voice shook like that. Didn't know why his hands were trembling now, beneath the linen-covered table. But he knew one thing for certain. He had seen her face before. Leonard sat alone in the study of his penthouse. The fireplace crackled softly, but his eyes weren't on the flames. They were locked on a memory, an old one he had buried beneath years of ambition and silence. Asha. Her name carried the kind of weight that didn't fade with time. She had been fire and earth all at once, intense, grounded, brimming with passion for art and justice. Back then, Leonard was just a business student at Savannah College, green and eager, but smitten. She had introduced him to things no textbook could: the rhythm of street murals, the politics behind public space, the smell of turpentine and rebellion. They had met at a student-led community project near River Street, both volunteering. He for a resume line, she because she believed it mattered. Her braids were always pulled up in a scarf, paint often smudged on her arms, her laughter echoing like music across the campus quad. He had loved her, not with hesitation, not with curiosity, truly loved her. But his family had other plans. The Crosses were old money Atlanta, known for real estate and whispered standards. They weren't loud about their disapproval. They didn't need to be. A look from his father, a warning from his mother cloaked in concern for your future, a revoked tuition payment, all signals meant to steer him away from distractions. And so he chose. He walked away from Asha without a proper goodbye. No explanation, just a sudden silence that grew heavier with each passing month. Her letters had come, at first, 2, maybe 3. He didn't remember reading the second. He remembered, too clearly, setting the third on his desk and never opening it. Now, that moment with the waitress, Jasmine, had cracked open everything he'd boarded up. Her voice, that scar, the look in her eyes. It hadn't just rattled him. It had awakened something he thought was long dead. He picked up his phone and called a man he hadn't spoken to in years. "I need someone found," he said. The investigator was discreet and fast. Leonard didn't sleep much as he waited. He avoided the press, skipped meetings, ignored messages. 3 days later, the call came. "She passed away, sir. 8 years ago. Cervical cancer." Her name was Asha Daniels. Single mother. No known relatives. She had one daughter. Name, Jasmine Carter. Leonard's lungs locked. He sat down slowly, eyes burning. "There's more," the investigator added, clearing his throat. "We found some personal effects. Old photos. Notes. One item you may want to see for yourself." The package arrived by courier the next morning. Leonard opened it with unsteady hands. There were photographs. Asha in overalls, her smile undimmed even in grainy black and white. One showed her with a little girl, around 6, curls springing out in every direction, holding a paintbrush twice her size. Another was Asha standing alone in front of a mural, arms crossed proudly. And then the letter. The envelope was worn, the edges curled. His name, Leonard Cross, was written on the front in Asha's unmistakable handwriting, but it was stamped "Return to Sender." He didn't breathe for a moment. The seal had never been broken. He opened it. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded neatly. Asha's handwriting was still strong, still familiar, even now. "I never thought I'd be writing this. But if this finds you, I want you to know our daughter is smart and kind, and she doesn't need anything from you except maybe someday a chance to know where she came from. If you ever grow brave enough, come find her. Not for me, for her." Leonard stared at the words until they blurred. His jaw tightened, and he held the paper against his chest as if it might bring her back. He thought he had chosen legacy, but what he'd really chosen was absence. And now, absence had a name. Jasmine. A face. A voice that whispered the past into the present. Asha was gone, but her story wasn't. And now, for the first time in decades, Leonard knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. The cafe was quiet, modest. Leonard reserved a table in the back, away from the windows and casual onlookers. His fingers curled around a chipped coffee mug as he waited, unsure if she would show. Part of him hoped she wouldn't, because that would be easier. But another part, the part that had been haunted for weeks, prayed she would. When Jasmine finally walked in, the bell above the door chimed, and Leonard looked up. Her posture was guarded, her hands buried deep in the pockets of her denim jacket. She didn't wear makeup, didn't smile, and her eyes didn't wander. She came straight to the table. He stood. "Thank you for coming." She nodded, slowly. "You said you wanted to talk." They sat, silence sitting between them like a third person. "I know who you are now," she began, folding her arms. "And I know what you're worth. But let's get one thing clear. I'm not here for money. I want the truth." Leonard nodded once, solemnly. "You deserve it." He hesitated. Not out of shame, but because the words hurt as much to say as they had to remember. "I loved your mother," he said, "more than I've ever loved anyone. We met in college. She was brilliant, fierce, full of fire. But my family—" Jasmine raised a hand. "Let me guess. They didn't approve. They threatened to disown me. Take everything. My father said I'd be nothing with her." She tilted her head. "And you believed him?" Leonard looked down at his cup. "I was young. I didn't know how to be brave. I chose a future over a life. And I've regretted it every single day since." Jasmine's jaw clenched. "She raised me alone. She worked 2 jobs. She died before I graduated. And you what? Sat in skyscrapers and forgot her." "I never knew about you," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Not until that night. When you mentioned the scar, it was like seeing her ghost." Jasmine blinked quickly, willing herself not to break. "She told me to remember that scar. Said if I ever saw a man with it, I might have found my father. She made it sound like you might care. I didn't get her letter. It came back unopened. I still have it." The silence that followed was heavier than anything either had carried before. Finally, Jasmine asked, "If you'd known? If you'd gotten that letter, would you have claimed me?" Leonard didn't flinch. "Yes, even if it cost you your fortune." He didn't answer right away. Back then, I might have hesitated. But now, without a doubt." Jasmine looked away, out toward the street, blinking hard. "That hesitation is what made her do it alone. You know that, right?" He nodded. "You lost her," Jasmine whispered. "And so did I. But only one of us had a choice." Leonard looked down at something he'd brought with him, a small, creased piece of paper. He slid it gently across the table. Jasmine glanced down. It was a child's drawing, a stick-figure girl holding hands with a tall man under a tree. The man had a half-moon on his wrist. Above them, in crooked handwriting, "Me and Daddy, one day." Her throat tightened. "Where did you get this?" "It was in your mother's things. The investigator found it in a box of her keepsakes." She stared at it, stunned. Leonard leaned back, his voice softer than before. "I know I can't go back and fix what I broke. I can't undo what she had to carry alone. But I'm here now, not to ask for anything, just to let you know that I want to know you, if you'll let me." Jasmine didn't speak. She folded the drawing gently, placed it into her bag, and stood up. "I don't know what I'm ready for," she said. "But thank you for telling me the truth." She didn't hug him, didn't reach for his hand. But before she turned to leave, she looked him in the eye. And for the first time, Leonard didn't see the waitress from the fundraiser. He saw the echo of Asha, staring back at him through their daughter's eyes. He remained seated long after Jasmine walked out, the bell above the door chiming again. The coffee had gone cold, but the truth, for the first time, was warm in the open air. The days after the cafe meeting unfolded in quiet waves. Jasmine didn't rush to call Leonard again. Instead, she found herself pulled towards something less direct, something deeper. A memory her mother once shared, long before sickness drained her voice. They'd been walking past a mural in the historic district, a vibrant burst of color blooming across the side of a brick building. Asha had paused in front of it, fingers brushing the air like she was touching invisible paint. Jasmine was just a kid then, maybe 8, squinting up at the giant swirl of faces and cities and stars. "I used to help with this one," Asha had murmured. Jasmine hadn't understood the weight of that sentence at the time, but now it echoed like a bell in her chest. Late one night, Jasmine opened her laptop and searched the archives of the city's Public Arts Commission. She sifted through dozens of old grant records, squinting at scanned PDFs and yellow memos. Her mother's name, Asha Daniels, surfaced in an early project proposal tied to a 2002 urban renewal initiative funded by the Cross Development Foundation. Leonard's company. Heart-pounding, she opened the official plaque file. 3 lead artists were listed. Asha's name was missing. She blinked hard, scrolling through old committee emails. One thread referenced adjustments to the final crediting. No reason. No documentación. Just gone. Jasmine closed her eyes. Her mother's contribution erased. Quietly, efficiently, like so many women of color in spaces where their presence was never meant to last. She knew what she had to do. That Saturday, Jasmine took the train downtown. The mural still stood, sprawling across the weathered red brick of an old garment factory. It was brighter than she remembered, restored in recent years, but the lines were the same. She walked its length slowly, taking photos with her phone, zooming in on the signature corner where the artist's names were etched in ceramic tiles. Her mother's name wasn't there, but her mother's style was everywhere. Jasmine could recognize it now, the way the sun was painted with jagged fire, the delicate arch of a woman's brow, the clustered silhouettes of black children in the foreground. Asha had always painted with a kind of defiant softness. She made pain look beautiful and survival feel holy. Standing there, Jasmine didn't cry. She was past tears. That night, she wrote. It wasn't a takedown. It wasn't angry. It was truthful. She titled the blog post, Erased, but Not Forgotten, My Mother's Hidden Signature. She recounted how her mother's name had been quietly removed from a public mural she helped create. How legacy, especially for Black women in creative fields, was often stolen in silence. She didn't name Leonard. She didn't need to. The post wasn't about revenge, it was about recognition. This isn't just about my mother, she wrote. It's about every woman whose work decorates a wall, but not a headline. Who uplifts a city, but is never credited in its archives. It's time we remembered them. It's time we named them. She attached photos. The mural. The old grant application with Asha's name. The artist plaque without it. Then she posted. At first, a few friends shared it. Then local artists. Then a historian who'd been researching undercredited muralists. Within 48 hours, the post had been picked up by 2 digital culture magazines and reshared on a major Instagram account dedicated to street art justice. It exploded. Dozens of people flocked to the mural, some leaving flowers, others scrawling sticky notes in the margins. Asha Daniels mattered. Honor her name. Not erased anymore. An anonymous user updated the mural's entry on the city's public art database. Beneath the official credits, they added, co-created by Asha Daniels, artist and mother. Jasmine watched all of it unfold with a mixture of awe and pain. She hadn't intended for the post to go viral. But maybe this was what her mother had meant. Not legacy through wealth, but through truth. Through remembering. She didn't reach out to Leonard right away. She wanted to see what he would do now. Not as a billionaire, not as a father, but as a man standing in the shadow of a wall built, in part, by a woman he once claimed to love. The story had gone public. Now the silence had to answer. The Cross Development Winter Gala was meant to be predictable. Polished suits, a carefully scripted speech, a few photo ops with city leaders, and a toast to another year of record-breaking profits. It was the kind of event Leonard had mastered. Yet that night, as he stood backstage adjusting his tie, nothing about him felt composed. Jasmine's blog post had reached him within hours of its release. Not through a PR assistant, not in a press brief, but forwarded by an old friend who simply wrote, "Is this who I think it is?" He had read it in the dark of his study, the screen's glow catching the edges of dust on old picture frames. It wasn't the accusations that shook him, it was the restraint. Jasmine hadn't called for boycotts or revenge. She had simply asked the world to remember her mother. And he had forgotten her. More than that, he'd benefited from her silence. Now, he stood behind the curtain as his name was announced. The applause began politely, habitually. Leonard stepped forward, took the stage, and looked out at the crowd of investors, city officials, and media faces. His assistant handed him the printed speech. He didn't even glance at it. He folded it slowly and slid it into his jacket. "There's something more important I need to say tonight," he began, his voice firm but hollowed by weight. "And it's not about buildings or revenue. It's about legacy." A flicker of confusion passed over the audience, followed by silence. Over 2 decades ago, This company sponsored a mural in the heart of the city, one many of you have praised as a cornerstone of our community outreach. It's featured on our brochures, our walls, even our annual reports. But what you don't see is whose hands painted it, whose soul lived inside that color. Leonard paused, swallowing hard. One of the original artists, Asha Daniels, was removed from the final credits. Her name was erased. And though the mural still stands, her part in its creation has been buried for years. That's on me. Whispers began to ripple across the room, reporters shifting in their seats. I knew Asha, Leonard continued. I loved her once, and I failed her, not just personally, but publicly. I was young, scared, and too concerned with preserving an image. That fear cost me more than I can explain. It cost her dignity. It cost truth. He gestured toward the projector behind him. A new slide appeared, a photo of the mural, this time edited to include a fourth name in bold, hand-painted font. Asha Daniels. Applause didn't come right away. The room was frozen, suspended in the unfamiliar tension of raw truth. I can't go back and rewrite history, Leonard said, but I can acknowledge the wrong. And tonight, I am restoring Asha Daniels' full credit to the project, effective immediately. Our foundation is funding a new plaque, permanent recognition, and an exhibit of her archived work. Not because of an article, not because I was forced, but because I owe it to the woman who helped build something beautiful and who was denied her place in the story. He stepped away from the podium. No bow, no applause cue, just truth, left hanging in the stillness. Across town, Jasmine sat cross-legged on her worn couch, laptop open, live stream buffering for a moment before catching up. She'd almost chosen not to watch. What was the point? A man like Leonard didn't speak from the heart in public. At least not in the world she knew. But when she saw her mother's name on that screen, painted in gold across a digital replica of the mural, something inside her cracked open. She didn't cry because he'd said her name. He hadn't. And that was okay. She cried because for the first time in 20 years, someone finally said her mother's. Not in a whisper, not in the past tense, but on a stage, in front of cameras and power and polished suits. And he didn't make it about redemption. He made it about responsibility. She closed her laptop slowly, leaned back against the cushions, and exhaled. No, they weren't family. Not yet. But truth had spoken, and that was a beginning. The mural looked different now. Not because the paint had changed, or the sun hit it any softer, but because beneath the swirls of color and the stretched arms of dancing children, a new tile gleamed in the winter light. Just one name, newly added but long overdue. Asha Daniels. Jasmine stood a few feet away from it, hands tucked into the sleeves of her coat, breath rising in little clouds. The street was quiet except for the crunch of approaching footsteps. Leonard appeared beside her, not in one of his tailored suits, but in a simple gray overcoat. He didn't speak at first. Neither did she. They stood like that for a long moment, shoulder to shoulder, strangers by time, but tethered by blood, and a woman neither of them would ever stop missing. She would have liked this, Jasmine said softly, glancing up at the mural. Leonard followed her gaze. She loved painting kids, said their joy didn't need permission. Jasmine smiled faintly. She used to say that when I was little. Another silence stretched between them, not awkward but measured. Careful. This doesn't fix everything, Jasmine said, still facing the mural. Not the years, not the questions, not what she went through. I know, Leonard replied, but it's a start. She turned to him then, her eyes steady. It was never about the money. It was about seeing her, about someone, especially you, finally saying she mattered. Leonard nodded. I should have said a long time ago. From the inside of his coat, he pulled out a small velvet box, gently worn at the corners. He held it out to her, hesitant but steady. She gave me this before we separated. Said it was for when I figured out what mattered more, legacy or love. I never opened it. Jasmine took the box without a word. The velvet felt cold beneath her fingers. She slowly opened it. Inside lay a silver locket, shaped like a teardrop. When she popped it open, a tiny photograph sat on one side. Asha, younger, radiant, holding a baby in her arms. Jasmine. On the other side, a faded scrap of paper curled slightly. Her mother's handwriting, delicate and certain. If she finds you, tell her I never stopped loving her. Jasmine's fingers trembled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she closed the locket gently and held it in her palm. Let's take it slow, she said quietly. No promises. No taites. Just one conversation at a time. Leonard looked down at her, and for the first time, the pride in his expression didn't come from ownership or legacy. It came from humility. I like that, he said. Snow began to fall in soft spirals around them, settling on benches, sidewalks, and the mural's outstretched hands. Jasmine slipped the locket into her coat pocket and took a step forward. Leonard matched her pace. They walked without urgency, side by side down a quiet street neither of them had ever walked together. No cameras, no speeches, just two people willing, finally, to meet each other without expectations. And somewhere between the crunch of snow underfoot and the hush of winter air, a fragile kind of peace settled between them. If this story touched your heart, like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more powerful soul-touching stories that restore faith in humanity.